so much for joining.
I trust everyone had a good lunch, and I'm happy to see so many of you that have come back for this afternoon. This is just a fantastic opportunity to spend some time with Dick Duerksen, and I know one of the stories he's going to tell this afternoon. When I got out my binder at home this morning and showed it to him, and right there on the top, there's the CD from back in 1995. I said, if for some reason you can't do it today, we can play that. And he said, well, there's more to the story. So, well, let's pray as we begin this afternoon. Father in heaven, again, what a beautiful Sabbath day it has been. We've been so blessed with the words that we've heard already today, the music we've been able to participate in, the friendship, the food, everything about it. Lord, we have felt your presence. And now this afternoon, be with Dick as he leads us through more of your word, more stories, so we get to know you even better. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Dick?
Good afternoon. So Vince wants me to tell you about why God sounds like Bert. I was working at Pacific Union College, my wife and I both. We were young, foolish, happy. Insight Magazine had written to us and asked that Brenda and I write an article for Insight explaining why so many young Adventist families were not having children. And that wasn't hard. We'd been married 9 years, didn't have kids, and so we could articulate this very clearly. And so we wrote the article, sent it to Insight, and one of my favorite letters ever, a rejection letter, came from Insight, in which Karen Spruill said, Karen and Mike both signed it. And they said, you know, it was all apologetic. We know we asked you to do this. We know that. And then finally it said, but we can't use it. It's too convincing. And so we laughed like that. And I sent a letter back and said, you've got to print it. You told me you were going to print it. You're going to pay me. And so you need to print it. But print the other side. Call it to parent or not to parent. And they did. And they asked some guy down in Texas to write the other side, and he wrote the most awful, bluffy article. Oh, there's my little boy, and he's got peanut butter and jelly on his chin. And I thought, how sick is that? Well, when the article came out, Brenda was 8 months pregnant. And we were roasted thoroughly by the students and faculty at PUC. And if I were to write the other side today, I'd probably say, there comes my boy with peanut butter and jam. It's amazing things you learn when you interact with reality. But in the process of being at PUC in those years, I was asked one time to speak for a Bible conference for the Nevada-Utah Conference, and they had it at Bishop, California. Because that was, you know, it's on the other side of the mountains, and so they gave that to the Nevada-Utah Conference for some reason. I don't think any of the conference presidents on the other side of the mountain wanted to drive over the mountain, you know, so you take it. So I got Bert and Donna Williams to come along, and Brenda and I and Bert and Donna got in my little car, and we drove to Bishop, and Bert played his guitar, which he is just brilliant at, and are you recording me by chance? Yes, sir. Good, thank you. My wife will want to know what I said. No, no, she won't be watching. She's in church. She's a good Sabbatarian. So we had a good time. It was a really fun. When we were done, we drove home. It was Sunday afternoon, and we had an appointment in Carson, Nevada to eat lunch with a friend, one of our students who had lived with us for a while. And when I got to Lee Vining, driving up Interstate or Highway 395, US 395, that goes tweaking along the eastern side of the Sierras, I got to Lee Vining, and I remembered what one of the biology teachers at PUC he'd been regaling me with stories of his childhood. Don Hemphill. He was raised in Bodie, California. Bodie. And if you want to look it up, it's a waste of your time, but you know, you might. It's actually a state park now, a California state park. And the reason is, Bodie was the #1 silver mine in the entire United States for years. It was bigger than Virginia City or anything in Colorado by far. And it's way up in nowhere. I mean, Reno, there's hardly any. On the edge of Mono Lake, Lee Vining, and so he'd always said, you got to go to Bodie. And I said, yeah, kids, you want to go? So we went beyond Mono Lake, turned right. 5 miles in, there's a road that goes north. It says Bodie, 10 miles. An Audi 100LX, which was, you know, a car. It certainly wasn't a dirt road or a four-wheel drive car. And we went 5 miles in. It was a decent day. You know, there were clouds, but it was cold, but it was February. What do you expect? So we went 5 miles in, came over the top of a hill, and I saw 2 state park vehicles, green and white, over on the right, and they were, I don't remember, 2 pickups, I think. And they were just parked. And so I glanced over, and I started to say, wonder why they're parked down here. And we hit the stream. And when we hit the stream, it was solid ice until we got in the stream. And then it was, the ice came right to the gunnels, right to the door rails. And I got out, and Bert got out, and we stood on the ice, of course, and we tried to break it, and we were light, too light for that. Could probably had better chance at it now, but walked around. The tailpipe was half submerged in water and bubbly. And so we had a family council, the 4 of us. What do you want to do? We can walk. We tried everything. Let me tell you, we got the jack out. We tried jacking the car up. We tried everything we could dream of. Nothing of it worked. We couldn't. I didn't have any rope. I couldn't tie it to anything. We didn't have, you know, I didn't have a Jeep that had all the good stuff on it, or I could have fixed this easy. But I had a white man's car, as one of my friends told me. And so we couldn't get out. I was scared, but I was young. So I thought, there's solutions here. We could walk 5 miles back the Lee Vining Road and wait for somebody to drive by and pick us up, take us into the service station, and then bring a tow truck. This was long before cell phones. This would have been 1976, I think. And so we decided to hike into Bodie. If there were state park vehicles here, there were people in Bodie. And Bodie's 5 miles. It's no big deal. 5 in, 5 up. Doesn't matter. It matters, because that is a huge difference. You go up about 2,000 feet in that 5 miles or more. And as we got out, we put on our jackets. We actually had gloves. We didn't have good shoes, but we had good. They weren't just tennis shoes. And we started hiking. We waved goodbye. You know, you went as far as you could. We waved goodbye. It's the last time I will ever see you in my life, you know, and kissed our wives goodbye. And then we hiked up a ways where we could last see the car. We waved, and they jumped and waved, and then we hiked on. And it started to snow. A little. But snow's no big deal. I had a hat. Started to snow more. Snow's no big deal. We had boots. Started to snow more. Snow's no big deal. We had gloves. And we hiked, and we walked. And the snow became a blizzard. And the wind hit, and the higher we went, the worse it got, until Bert and I were walking almost to our knees in snow that now was the accumulation of winter. And we're thinking, and we're gonna go into Bodie. There are no tracks anywhere, so if anybody has driven in and out on a snowcat or something, it's blown it all away. And we didn't know what to do. And then, boom, we ran into a sign. And we didn't see it, we ran into it and looked up, and we were able to wipe some snow off, and it said, "Approaching Bodie." Yeah! Said we got it made. And so we did the intelligent thing. We made sure to be perpendicular, and then we walked straight toward Bodie. I don't know how long it was. Boom, we ran into another sign. We're almost there. Until we saw where we had scraped the snow off and realized that we had just done a full 360. Bert looked at me and said, "I can't go any farther." And I said, "Neither can I. There's no way. Let's just rest here." And so we sat down in the snow, and then we laid down in the snow, and both of us went sound asleep. They say, at least I've read books that say, that freezing is the best way to die because you just go to sleep. We thought that was what was happening, and it did. We just laid down, and we have no idea how long we slept. None. But all of a sudden, I heard Bert say, "Dick, wake up!" And we were looking at each other. And he said, "Thank you." And I said, "What?" And he said, "You just told me, Dick, wake up." Bert thinks I sound like God, or God sounds like me. I know God sounds like Bert because I heard God through Bert's voice wake me up in a snowdrift underneath a sign that said "Approaching Bodie." And when that happened, I never forget, we were sitting up in the snow. Bert had snow all over him. I'm sure I was worse. And we could see through the sign of its stakes, we could see just a little bit of clearing, and down there we could see a building. We ran. You ever tried to run in snow that's up to your knees? We pretended we were running. And we got to the building. It was a barn. It had a D8 cat in it. It was locked down. You could not get into that. If we could just get inside, we could get some warm. We just got to get some warm. How do we get some warm? We had no idea how to get any warm. And so we decided we're not going to go there. We could tell where the streets were. This blizzard was back just destroying us again now. And so we were able to walk along a street and touch the buildings and kind of scruffle along. And these are the old ghost town buildings. That's all that's left. And we came to the cafe, the Bodie Cafe. And it's wavy glass. The windows in it are wavy glass, the old ancient, and it get painted on the windows. And I'm thinking, oh, this is bad. Inside is a stove with a can of oil. And I know there's a box of matches. I know we're going to live now because we're able to get into this store, go get that fire going, and cuddle next to it because I know my feet are frostbit. So we did it. It took me 4 or 5 times, I don't remember for sure right now, with my glove to break the one window that did not have writing on it. I don't know why I did that, but I did. I broke it. We were able to get inside, unlock it, go in, start the fire, cuddle next to that until our toes were starting to feel like they were normal again. And Bert said, I'm going to go see if there's anybody in town. I think I'm okay now. Just stayed cuddled next to the fire. And he was not alone. He had a ranger with him, a genuine California State Park ranger, a dude with a hat. This is Bodie. Yeah, I'll just run through some of these just to show chaos. Oh, you're at Camp Hale. That's Bodie. In fact, go back one. This is next to the cafe in Bodie. That's one of their wavy windows, reflecting the rest of Bodie in the distance. The ranger said he had a lot of nasty things to say about why are you up here? Why are you so stupid? Why did you break the window? Blah, blah, blah. He was really not pleasant. And he took us to the headquarters, which I don't remember which building it's in right now, but you go to the building and the only heat in the building is one of those wall furnaces. Remember those? They're 6 feet tall, built in the wall, and they've got gray heating elements in them. And he said, you might want to get close to that and take off some clothes. Your clothes are just soggy. So we did, and there in our jockeys, leaning up as close as we dared get to this furnace. Oh, it felt so good. And then the ranger said, Chief will be here in a minute. I thought, will he have feathers? And he came in, and there were no feathers. He had a Smokey the Bear hat. He's 6 feet 6 inches tall and weighs enough to play for the Rams. And he just stood there, took his hat off, pounded the snow off of it, and looked down at me and said, you broke a window in the cafe. Do you realize it's a felony to break anything like that in a state park? What are you doing here anyway? Are you stupid? And I said, yes. Why are you here in February? Don't you know it's closed? And I said, well, I Googled it. No, I didn't. There was no Google. I said, you know, Don Hemphill told me I should come to Bodie, and I'm just doing what he told me. And this big monster curled down and sat on the floor next to me. You know Don Hemphill? And I said, yeah, I do. I teach at I work at Pacific Union College, one of the administrators, and Don's one of our biology teachers. I know about Don. And he spent probably 20 minutes telling me Don Hemphill stories. And then, you know, do you realize that his dad was in charge of all of the old mule transport? And he ran the teams that went from here down to Carson City. And there were at least 3 times they were robbed, and they just gave them the gold. They said, whatever you do, don't touch my mules. They're really special. And they said, we don't want mules, we want gold. So they gave him the gold, and they went on down to... No, and he had more stories than I've ever heard in my life. And finally, he took a deep breath, and he said, where's your car? And I said, it's in the stream by your trucks. Ah. And then he used several really bright-colored words. And he looked at the guy, the other ranger, and he said, get on the radio and call down there. We got to get a tow truck in. Those women are probably frozen to death. And then he looked at me and he said, you know, my guest room's full. You're going to have to stay with Bill. His wife's a pretty good cook. And we'll take you out of here in the Snowcat in the morning. We'll see what we can get for your wives. Goodbye. And he left. That was it. Done. Finished. He didn't write out a felony charge. I was so happy. He forgot. Yeah. Next morning, that night, Bill took us to his little house inside of one of the old ghost town houses, and his wife made chicken a la king. I'm a vegetarian. And that was the best meal I'd ever had. Man, it tasted, it was warm, baby. It was just nice. And so in the morning, we got up, got in the Snowcat, and the big ranger chief dude took us down the hill, Big Bob. We got to our car, it was gone, and he drove on into, that made me feel good that it was gone. We didn't know we hadn't heard anything. And then we got to Lee Vining at the service station, and our car was there, and our wives were there, and they couldn't decide whether to welcome us or beat us up. And they welcomed us, thank goodness, and they told us their story. They had sat in the car for 6 months, I think, and it ran and continued to bubble into the ice and the water. And every little while, and start walking up and then say, no, that's foolish, and go back and get in the car, or go back the other way, and they would pray and they would sing, and they sang all the songs they could sing to Zion, and songs about dying in the desert, and anything they could come up with. We'd never been to Bodie, we didn't know what we were doing, and I was thinking about how I was going to wring Don Hemphill's neck. No, he would bring mine. Why did you go in February? That was stupid. Yeah, I know, but... So we picked up, well, the ladies were there, and just at sundown, tow truck came up over the hill, and Brenda would say, I had just about given up when I looked behind in the rearview mirror, and I saw lights, and I said, Donna, look back. And Donna looked back, there's somebody coming, I thought so, and they both got out, they ran, and they met this tow truck, which had about an 18-year-old guy in it, and they threw their arms around him and kissed him and hugged him and said, thank you for coming, you are God's angel. And he said, oh, I'm a tow truck driver, ma'am, excuse me. And he pulled him out and took him down and followed him in, and there was just enough fuel in the tank to get to the service station where it ran out and stopped, dead. And that's the story about Bodie. God sounds like Bert. That's the ranger's house, the one they've remodeled. The rest of it's just junk. Go ahead and race through those for a minute. There's 2 or 3. This is the church. Bodie had a church and a boarding house and a toilet. And if you and this is what's left. These are pictures from Bodie later. And this is the organ. There's that cool beans in the church. I mean, it is just, I keep, Brenda always, well, that's kind of Bodie. That's better Bodie. Okay, I want you to notice the John. Go back one. I want you to notice the toilet in the far right of this picture. It's really what it looks like. It's just out in nowhere. Okay, go ahead. Stuff, that's parts of an old Ford truck. I love Bodie. It is a photographer's mecca. I mean, every place you look, there's something worth photographing. And I've been back many times since. And Bert has never gone with me. He said, I'm never going back there, baby. That's where we probably would have lived. It's about as far out of town as you can get and still have windows. I'm waiting for the two-hole John. When you see it, there you go. Okay. I want to know what you talked about. That's one of my favorite moments in Bodie. I've stood there and talked to the Rangers and others and laughed about it, and nobody has any answers. They just say, it's part of Bodie, then away you go. Okay, so years later, 1985, 10 years later, I'm working at Pacific Union College again after having done some other things. And one of the things I am responsible for, because I had been the youth director in the North Pacific Union for a couple of years, somehow in that process, I inherited logistics for the first ever international Pathfinder Camporee. The one that they're having in Gillette, well, that's how it's grown. I'm not going, by the way. I was camporeed out. But this one, we all got together in North America and decided we'd do this. We'd invite international in. It was going to be a big party. And so my role in the process is to, since I had lived in Colorado, that was my gift, is to take care of all the planning, all the logistics, all the stuff. Well, there's some problems with that. Because the place that the North American Division had chosen to hold the camporee is called Camp Hale, Colorado. And look it up. There's nothing there. It was the home for the 10th Mountain Division during the Second World War. It's where they trained soldiers to be able to do winter military work in the Alps. That was their purpose. It's cold. It's almost 10,000 feet. It's got big mountains on all sides. And when they left, they took everything with them. They cleaned out the whole valley. The valley is shaped like a cowboy boot. And the part they gave us to work with is the heel north, the heel and the rest of the boot going up. There's a river, the Eagle River goes right down through the middle and goes out the toe. So I hired I brought in plumbers, Pathfinder plumbers, one from Idaho and one from Florida. And they came in, they tested the water of the Eagle River we were thinking we might have 5,000 kids. That was really top number. They came back and they said, look at this. It's got so much giardia in it, we will need 1 billion porta-johns. This would never work. We can't use the water. There's no way we can purify it. We cannot have the camporee here. And then I went back to Leadville and I found a guy who had been in the 10th Mountain Division and had lived in Leadville ever since. And he said, no, water's pure, not the river, the wells. And I said, well, show me the wells. And so he was able to go back to Camp Hale, and we were able to scrounge the military blueprints for the whole thing. And so we found where the 3 wells were. 2 of them they had filled with concrete when they left. 1, they had only put 2 feet of concrete in. So we dynamited that and then told the government we'd broken a window in the cafe. No, we got permission from Forest Service and we blew that. And then we sent a well drilling outfit to go in and test the water and its flow so we knew whether we could use it or not. They chose to go on a Monday night when the Denver Broncos were playing the Green Bay Packers in Denver in a snowstorm. They didn't know it was going to be a slow storm, but it's known as the Ice Bowl, and the Broncos won, so it was okay. So we've got this guy up there, and he's working Monday night to get this. And so they're drilling. They finally get everything to where they're able to take a water sample, I guess. And I wait for my phone to ring Tuesday to tell me, got it solved, here's how much water we have, here's its purity level, and all the rest. I don't hear anything Tuesday. I don't hear anything Wednesday. Thursday afternoon late, I get a phone call. It's blue streaks of bad words. Why did you send me up there in a snowstorm? What? And I said, well, what have you been doing? I haven't heard from you for 3 days. Well, of course you haven't heard from me. What do you think? Turns out he has his trucks, and he starts pumping water out, and he's getting 10,000 gallons a minute, and it's freezing his trucks solid, and he can't move them. And he is out there cursing the world, trying to break up the ice that he's getting by answering my request, by finding how much water he can get out of it every minute. And all he wants to do is shout at me and not... By Thursday afternoon, he was calmed down a little bit, they say. It was tough, man. And finally, he told us how much water he had. We paid him well. And he said, you taught me a real important lesson. Never do that in February. Yeah, never go to Bodie in February either. Stop. So, we're getting ready for the camporee in July, whenever, June or July, whatever it was. And we have decided to go to Mitsubishi International and rent the 2 giant screens they are using at the Super Bowl that year. Those are 40-foot long, and they're semi-trailers. I didn't realize that, but they're semi-trucks that they hoist up and put in that little hole. This is the old days. And so the only way we can do this, if we're going to have, now it's up to 6,000, we're going to get 6,000 kids maybe, we're going to put 2 big containers, and we're going to drop these on top. But the guy from Mitsubishi looked at me and said, I like your idea. It sounds like fun. Can I go up with you and take a look? And so I've got the president of Mitsubishi International, U.S., I've got 2 plumbers. I've got, I don't know, several other guys. It's a full truck. Plus, I have the site manager who has been assigned to us by Maranatha Flights. This is before volunteers. Maranatha Flights International, John Freeman. I called him and I said, I got to have help. And so I've got their site manager who has come along, and he's going to be there to run all of our construction, all of our prep. He's the site guy. So we're driving the road from, and I've got the president of U-Haul, Rocky Mountain, who is renting me one of his motor homes. So I got a 35-foot motor home I'm driving. We're headed up the mountain towards Leadville, and it starts to snow. And then it really starts to snow. And then it gets to where we are in a genuine Rocky Mountain blizzard. I mean, this is beyond nasty. And I just said out loud, oh, Lord help me. I've not been in a blizzard like this since Bodie. And the dude from Maranatha looks at me and says, stop this rig. So I stopped. And he stood up, came over and stood beside my chair and said, young man, do you realize that you've broken a window in the cafe at Bodie and that's a felony in the state of California? This is Ranger Bob. That is Ranger Bob taking a spit bath at Camp Hale. Ranger Bob, in the 10 years, has met he and his wife have found Jesus, have become Seventh-day Adventist Christians, and he is the coordinator for construction for Maranatha Flights International. And he's the dude in my motorhome on the way to Camp Hale. And Bob and Artie became absolute best friends. I had the privilege of speaking at their memorial service, their funeral, both of them, and every time I would go to their house, Bob would somehow know I was coming. We'd make sure he didn't know. I'd walk in the door, I'd knock on the door, and he'd say, come in, Duerksen. Got your pecan pie waiting. I don't know how he did it. He always knew I was coming. He always knew the pecan pie should be ready, and he made the world's best pecan pie. You got any more pictures of Bob? He got a picture of, there's the camporee. Instead of 6,000, we had 20,000 kids. It was just amazing. We hadn't planned on that. We somehow survived everything. You know, there was pre-computers. This was 1984, 1985. I had 5 brand new Macintosh computers. They all worked fine. None of them knew what to do with the problems we gave them. It would be so easy today, it would be impossible then. That teepee lived at our house until last year. And our kids were raised with the teepee in the front yard at Pacific Union College. It was just glorious. Come on, one of those is Bob and, and the rainbow, that's over the Maranatha group. Before Camporee started, it poured. The day after it was over, it poured. We had hail and 6 inches of snow in the back of my Jeep. But nothing and there's the Camporee. You see where we filled the valley? If you go to Camp Hale today, there's a sign saying we were there, and you can, if you know where to look, you can find the bolts that the Columbia used to cinch down the Washington Monument. That's some young guy who was there with Mitsubishi. There they are, Bob and Artie, Dick and Brenda. I gave him that hat when they went into the nursing home. And when I did the memorial service, it was waiting for me on the pulpit. Really special. One of God's kids. That's the picture I took from the top of the Mitsubishi trailers. Questions or comments for me on anything I just told you? Thank you. That's good. Anything you want to tell me or ask?
Where were the water trucks?
Yeah. So we don't know how to get the water. By then we knew we had 10,000 people. We've got to get a lot of water. We've got to get it flowing. And so my 2 plumbers, Benny Tillman and Milford Terrell, they started working on the problem of the water. And there was no easy answer. And finally, one day, Milford said, you know what we need are a couple big milk trucks. And if we took milk trucks and if we pumped the water up a hill, if we put the milk trucks up there on this bench on the side of the mountain, hard to get them up there, push them up somehow. And then we have it flow down and we use irrigation pipe. It'll be perfect. Yeah, right. Hey, we're pathfinders. We can make miracles. So I called Milford and I said, would you go to Colorado for me and find the guy, whoever it is, who's the milk truck dude in Colorado? I got a couple names. Send those to you. Go down. Why don't you take Wico and go down and take a look? So Wico got on the pilot, got on the plane, took Milford. They flew from Boise down to Denver, landed at Butler, rented a car. They got a big SUV for some reason. And they drove out to where the milk trucks are, where the one guy who owns all the milk trucks in Colorado, believe it or not, the big 15,000 gallon silver trucks. And he got to the address, and Milford is taller than I and bigger, and Wico is smaller than I and Italian. And they got there, and instead of being a milk truck or a field of trucks all going to work or something, it was an empty field with a chain link fence. Had no idea what to do. Across the street, road, country outside of Denver, is one of those portable office buildings that they put at construction sites. It had a door in the center, and so Milford drove over, got out, he and Wico went walking up to the door and knocked on it and opened it and walked inside. And the minute they walked inside, there's a counter and a lady standing behind the counter with her hands hidden, and two guys sitting at chairs behind her with their hands visible on pistols. Before Milford could say a word, one of the guys said, "You're narcs, show us your badges." And Milford automatically reaches his wallet, opens it. He's a fire chief in Boise, and it's got this big badge, shining gold and silver, and they practically shot him. And by then we're just looking for milk trucks across the road. And who are you? We don't even know what we're doing here, kind of thing. And now everybody is standing there. Their pistols are drawn. They're pointing right at them. And we say, you guys are narcotics. We know that. I still have no idea what was going on in that trailer. None. And I won't ask. Took 20 minutes to talk their way out of the trailer without being killed. They got back to their truck, their big SUV, and just sat there and shivered. God, it's a camporee for pathfinders. We don't want to die over this. It was just awful. Finally, Milford turned on the truck, turned around, started driving back towards the airport. And as he did, they meet a milk truck driving toward him. And Milford drives right in front of it, parks, gets out, runs over. The milk truck stops. He runs over, practically opens the door himself, and looks up. The guy says, "What do you guys want?" And he said, "We want to borrow 2 milk trucks for," and he gave him the full spiel about, it's sort of like Boy Scouts, but nicer because the girls get to come. And, and so, forgive me. The guy finally took the cigar out of his mouth and said, "I like it. I'll help. Where do you," and he starts, and he's a veteran who remembers the 10th mountain. So yeah, we got 2 huge, brand new milk trucks brought to the camporee with a giant new Peterbilt. And we offered to haul him up there with our 4-wheelers, and he said, "No, I'm doing this myself." And he drove them clear up the side of the mountain, parked them for us, and then we pumped pure, fresh water, Denver Bronco water, up to the trucks, and then we irrigation piped it all the way down. And everybody had ice water. And then we made showers, and everybody froze in the shower. It was so fun. Ah! Every morning you could hear screams from one end of Camp Hale to the other. And there's 1,000 other Camp Hale stories, but there you go. You got the best 3. Fun? There you go. Time's up. Yeah, I think. What do you have?
Well, I was going to ask them if their time was up. Is your time up?
Questions or comments? I mean, you got the mail truck, but the milk trucks. Yes. Yay! Well, and you saw a picture of Ron Streeter, I think, who was coordinating, let's see, what was Ron's job? Programs, I think. Yeah, Ron did programs, Dan did, we had a lot of fun. But it was absolutely exhausting, and for all three of us who were actually for the four key leaders of the whole thing, we basically bailed out of Pathfinders and youth ministry after that, did other stuff. It was too exhausting. It was just overwhelming. We didn't have anything to start with, remember.
Do you have enough left in you can tell us the story that leads up to the peanut butter sandwiches? Starting with the motorcycle guy coming to church?
No, I don't remember. No, I don't know what you're asking. I'm sorry, peanut butter current?
Yeah. The church. Guy on the motorcycle came and sat in the front.
Oh, no. I don't know. I'm not going to be able to do the details right.
Okay.
Sorry. Sorry, no. I can't do everything. Some other time.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
My brother was a physician in Denver. He was part of the medical team at Camp Hale.
Let me tell you a physician story from Camp Hale. I get a phone call from the general conference. Dick, we just got a big box from Colorado that we're going to send to you. It's your problem. Thank you very much. So I get this box a few days later. And in it is a 3.5-inch document that are the rules for operating a daycare center for children in the state of Colorado. And a note from the state of Colorado, from Frank Rady, the director of state children's programming, that if we were going to have more than 12 children, of Child Protective Services was going to require us to register as a daycare center. Well, I read about the first 4 pages and said, we're never going to be able to do any of this. This is just dumb. And so I called his office, and I said I wanted to come meet with him. And the lady, Frank, the dude wants to meet you. And he said, send him in. So I flew to Denver. I made up a full plot plan. We had a plot plan of where everything was going to be, how we were going to do it all, malarkey. And so I took all that under my wings, and I prayed. I got to DIA in the old days. Went to Budget Rental Car. They had come to know me well, and they gave me a brand new Corvette. No, not a Corvette. It was a brand new Camaro that day. And I roared downtown, parked, prayed outside of a gray government building, went inside, 3 stories up, around the gray, inside with the frosted glass. He came to the door that said Child Protective Services. Okay, knocked on the door, walked in, and here's the secretary. And she's behind a desk, with her hands hidden, and I'm thinking, yeah, she's got a gun. We had just gone through the problem with milk trucks. She looked at me and she said, what do you want? She was a really friendly place. And I said, I'm Dick Duerksen with Pathfinder Camporee. Frank, he's here. And some of you will remember this. Grizzly Adams stood up. I mean, this guy's got a Pendleton shirt, cowboy boots that are well worn, big beard, hat sitting over there on the top of it. I'm thinking, man. So, come here. So I walk over, I roll out my stuff, and I said, Mr. Rady, let me tell you what we're planning to do. And he said, all right, I'll listen. So I went through how we were going to use, how many toilets we had, and how they matched what their requirements were, and where we were going to get the water, and how we were, and All of a sudden, he looked at me and he said, "What's your name? What'd you say your name was?" And I said, "Richard Duerksen. Sometimes I'm Richard." "How do you spell your last name?" Duerksen. "Got any relatives in in Denver?" That's a hard question. I have one relative living in the Denver area. He's about yay tall, about yay wide. I first met him when I was a kid, and he was a missionary obstetrician in British Guyana. And he came back through our place. We were missionaries in the Caribbean at that point, and Eddie came through, and I remember meeting him, and I've met him a few other times. He did my premarital physical, and so I went to his office, and he came out into the waiting room and said, "All right, I'm looking for somebody." And then he used some really women words. "You come." And I got up and went in very humbly, thinking I did not have the parts. He loved to embarrass me. And if I said, people loved him or they really didn't prefer him, I don't know which this is. And God said, "Love." And I said, "Yes, sir. I have one relative here, an obstetrician named Eddie Duerksen." "Dr. Duerksen to you, sir." And I said, "Well, you know him." And this guy stood up, sat me down, and said, "Let me tell you about Dr. Duerksen. My wife and I had a little baby 6 months ago. It was hard. Her delivery was really tough. My little baby was not born right. It was premature. Do you know, Dr. Duerksen put a cot in her room. He slept there for a week so that he would be there in case there was any problem with my little boy. That's Dr. Duerksen. I don't know anyone in the world I trust and love more than Dr. Edward Duerksen. I'm so proud to be able to know you, sir." And he started shaking my arm, and he said, "Come here, I got an idea." And he grabs all my stuff, walks me down the hall to Elizabeth's office. She's the big cheese. And he opens her glass cubicle and says, "Elizabeth, you're not going to believe it. This guy is Eddie Duerksen's cousin. Well, you know my doctor." And he gives the story to her all over again. I'm sure she's heard it 30 times. And he says, "They're doing a program, kind of like Boy Scouts, but the girls get to come along, and they want to do a party out here in Camp Hale, Colorado." And I didn't think we could help them. But I read this stuff, and I think it's just fine. We don't need to worry about them. Would you sign this? That is still on the wall in front of my desk at my house. Dick Duerksen. They didn't put it to the Adventist Church or Pathfinders. It's Dick Duerksen. Is given a permit to operate a daycare center for 16,000 children in Camp Hale. Luckily, it had an end date. And she signed it. Frank signed it. And they came up to party with us one day and smiled. I got out of the building, found a payphone, called Eddie. And I said, "Eddie, hi, Dick. You got syphilis?" I said, "Eddie, I just got an experience I need to tell you about." I told him, and he said, "What was their name?" Rady, Frank, and I forget the wife's name. "Oh, Dick, I hate to tell you that. I don't remember them." "What do you mean?" "Dick, I have a cot. It's gone in so many rooms over the years. My job is to help all of them make it through. I'm sorry I don't remember them. If I saw them, I probably would. I'm glad." And then he started to cry. And he just wept and wept and wept on the phone. And he said, "Dick, I didn't know I was any good or making any difference anywhere. Thank you for calling." Is that cool? So that's my doctor. This is my medical story from Camp Hale. The rest of them, I don't know. Nobody even got a rattlesnake bite. It was really boring. I quit. Thank you for the privilege of sharing with you. I would give anything to have you meet Eddie, to have you meet Bob and Artie, have you meet my wife who suffered through all this with us. At the end of the camporee, everybody almost left. I've got a Jeep. I've been chasing people out. We've been helping people with mechanical problems. The guys from U-Haul were there picking up all their motorhomes, or as many as they could. I hired a bunch of what the U-Haul director called old women to drive big motorhomes back down over the mountain from over Vale and on down to deliver them back to you. He said, "Where do you get all these old biddies? They just can drive like banshees." And I said, I've got one motorhome. I can't get started. I'll come. So he came up and he gerrymandered it and got it running, waved goodbye, drove that thing, and at the gate of the Eisenhower Tunnel on the west side, it exploded. The engine blew and it burned that thing down to the rims. And when he got home or got access to a phone, he called me and he said, "I am so glad I was driving that instead of one of your ladies." He said, "She never would have, I just had this horrible nightmare thinking that I would not be driving that and one of those women would be. God, your God is really good." Anyway, so we're done. Everything's cleaned out. There's nothing left but rainbows. And me in my motorhome, Jeep, van, and I have my dad and mom are there. And there's a knock on my door Sabbath morning after the camporee is over and we've done all the cleanup we dare do. And I opened the door and the State Park, actually Forest Service officer in charge of what we were doing was standing there. It was snowing hard. He looked at me and he said, "Dick, I'm a Catholic, and you're an Adventist. It's Sabbath, and you have an ox in the ditch." So I walked outside, and he said, "I don't know anything except this place has got to be cleaned up before it gets snowed in." There were we didn't have enough of the big 40-foot waste management containers, and we needed about 8 more. And there were a number of areas where the kids had not put their trash in, as we had told them, in big black plastic bags and tied them tightly. And I've got trash blowing everywhere across Camp Hale. And he says, "I can't stay." And I said, "You can do something for me, though. Go to WM, Waste Management in Eagle, and have them send me 4 more containers before noon." And he said, "I'll do my best." Containers came about 1 o'clock. 4 big trucks brought them in, and by then we had at least 4 they could haul out. And my family and I spent all day Sabbath picking up trash at Camp Hale. God will never forgive us. I mean, that's one of the longest days. It was cold. It was hard. The trash was nasty, and it blew everywhere. And we didn't get it done. And about 5 o'clock, an old beat-up combi van came driving into the valley, came over to where I was parked, and this guy and his wife and their 3 teenagers came piling out of it. And they said, "We hear that you might still have some work that needs to be done here. Is there any chance we could get a job?" And I said, "Cleanup. How much?" And they looked, talked, $500. Baby, I peeled off $500 faster than you could imagine. And that night we picked up stakes and went home. And they did a perfect job. It took them 2 days. And the ranger called me and said, "They're done." Dick, this was a miracle. The whole thing. Thank you for coming on my shift. Is that cool? I don't care what the problem is. God's way ahead of you.
I hope that between church and this afternoon, that there's a story that you remember. And whatever is happening in your life at a particular time, you think of a story and it will remind you of how God can work. I know that's what, when God sounds like Bert, the very first time I heard that. We can never forget.
And Bert and I laugh about it often.
We're both still alive.
And our wives.
Well, to be continued tomorrow morning? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, again, we have just been blessed on this Sabbath day. We've been blessed